In the book Columbine, David Collins states that on April 20th of 1999, Dylan and Eric came to school armed with guns and bombs, which resulted in many casualties. After the tragedy, students and their families attended their local churches in hopes to gain the happiness and hope that was lost in their community. Families sued for the neglect of the corpses of their kids, and they complained about the law forces on the scene of the crime. After having analyzed Eric and Dylan's notebooks and personality, psychologists concluded that Eric was diagnosed as a psychopath, and Dylan was depressed, and they saw the shooting as a way out of their miserable lives. In the following years, the school was rebuilt, and in 2007, a memorial was made in honor of the lost lives.
Because Colin aimed to prove the true events that took place at Columbine and discredit prior conceptions, he focused on 5 main points. First, he suggested that the misconceptions were created by the confused testimonies of scared victims, which were broadcasted all over the nation. Next, he explained that the story of Columbine gained national attention because it was one of the very first violent crimes committed at a school by people who attended. Because of this, others feared that this would become a possibility and searched for answers to stop it. He stated that, contradictory to prior beliefs, Eric committed this crime out of a thirst for power and out of hate for humans in general. In addition, Dylan went through with the shooting because he wanted to impress Eric, but he also knew that it would most likely end in death, which he saw as a way out of his sadness. Colin finally came to the conclusion that because people didn't have a reasonable answer to why the shooting occurred, they looked to the typical stereotypes of angry teenagers and believed that Eric and Dylan must have acted out of a desire to have a higher social status at school rather than out of hatred.
David Collins' purpose in actually writing the book was to clear up misconceptions about what actually happened during the Columbine tragedy. He also stated during the book that most of the myths were in place by nightfall, but then it was given that the killers had been targeting jocks. Reporters had actually created these misconceptions based on what people were actually thinking who were in the tragedy, even though they did not know themselves what actually happened. And even he also stated that the captives seemed to be held in commoners, but reporters conflicted, and no one really actually knew, but people believed what the reporters said, even though there were so many different variations of what actually happened.
Cullen suggested psychopaths develop a handful of primitive emotions closely related to their own welfare. 3 have been identified: anger, frustration, and rage. Eric showed signs of psychopathic behavior throughout his life, but was never caught because he knew how to manipulate the emotions of others to make them believe that he was an innocent kid. Cullen also stated that suicide was consuming him. No way Dylan was confessing that. He tried explaining some other ideas, but people were too thick to understand. Dylan believed that his life served no purpose and that no one else would be able to understand his emotions, so he saw a way out.
Here are some pictures that describe the personalities of Eric and Dylan. Both of the shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Clavel, studied about German and the Nazis. Later, they became besotted with Adolf Hitler, and their admiration of Hitler can be one of the causes that inspired them to kill all the people they hated. Eric and Dylan often used to play video games before the actual shooting. Research shows that video games can sometimes affect people mentally and make it difficult for them to differentiate between the fiction and real world. Them playing video games that involve shooting people foreshadows their violent action in the future.
Our group gave Columbine a B because we felt it contained lots of useful information that discredited the previous consumptions about the shooting. However, we felt it was sort of confusing because it did not go in chronological order, and it often seemed to contain the same information from previous chapters.